Marvel's nailed everything it's done since it started printing Star Wars comics again. But how does it handle an event? Woof woof! Hey guys, it's me Marcus, aka the Mad Dog, and we're back with another video. For the main event written by Charles Soule and illustrated by Luke Ross, the first issue of Star Wars War of the Bounty Hunters was published by Marvel Comics in June of 2021, with the fifth and final issue being released in October the same year. And Han Solo's being captured, frozen in carbonite and being transported across the galaxy by Boba Fett. He will be at the centre of a fierce quest to claim the scoundrel, and with the rebels, the Hutts, the bounty hunters and the Empire itself forced into the same room, who will emerge victorious? I'm going to do this review a little bit differently because normally I'd start with some kind of art discussion, but I read this entire event and it varies wildly. Straight out of the gate, the alpha issue that kicks off this entire event had me hyped as anything. And take this as a good or a bad sign, but this was my favourite part of the event. Yep. The first issue. Because Boba Fett is one of those Star Wars characters that I always enjoy, but he's just a bit of an enigma to me, and it's very rare that he goes beyond just being something that's cool. However, in the Alpha issue, that worked in his favour. The stakes were high because he'd already lost Han, and then there was this arena that he needed to go through so that he could get information. They did a great yet simple update to his look, and it was just brutal fight after brutal fight, with Fett looking like he was barely trying. Reminded me a lot of the beginning of Planet Hulk, and I was just so hyped for this event because of this. Which is great because I wasn't too in love when I read Charles Soule's Darth Vader run and reviewed it a few months ago, so I was interested to see how he'd handle an entire Star Wars event, but this was definitely a step in the right direction. Boba's characterization was great and I wish we could have seen more of it. There was one plot thread in particular where he teamed up with another bounty hunter who was on a different mission and wanted to save Han and free him, and I loved this. They weren't working towards the same motivation, so you knew at one point they'd have to turn against each other, and that was really interesting to read, and I wish this would have been the centre line throughout the entire event. He also just had some great one-on-one battles that I feel really elevated him as a character. He was efficient, cutthroat, and clearly just motivated to the job at hand. In particular, there was one scene where he was up against Chewbacca and he did whatever he needed to just get out of that situation as quickly as possible. So if you're a Chewbacca fan, maybe skip past that scene. Him at the head of this event was such a smart choice, but it seems like the storyline didn't want to put the spotlight on him as much as the covers would make you want to believe. I don't know, it's like maybe, this might sound crazy, but I shouldn't be judging books by the cover. However, this event overall was just sort of okay, I guess. It's set between episodes 5 and 6, but I still thought that there could be potential here, despite the fact that we know where this needs to end. That's been the best thing about these modern Marvel Star Wars comics, is that they can still tell interesting stories, despite the fact that they've got these pre-designated endings. So if you were wondering what happened between Han being collected on Cloud City and him being delivered at Jabba the Hutt's palace on Tatooine, which I have horrifically misspelled in my notes, it's here, and the answer is that Fett just kind of loses him for a few days and there's a bit of an auction. My biggest problem is that this feels like it didn't need to be an event, but for some reason just decided to rope every other series into it. And at some point, some of these series acted like they didn't even know that the event was happening. And I did read this on the Marvel Unlimited app, which I did recently do a review of, and they did have a reading guide for this event, but it's still overall a little bit incoherent. Kind of like any conversation with me. I am hoping that the mapping's laid out well in the omnibus, which you can already order from the channel's sponsor, Organic Price Books. They've got great packaging, fast shipping, and amazing customer services, and if you use code WOOFWOOF, you'll get $2 off your order. And if you're ordering 3 or more books and you want them to be delivered together, make sure you use code WOOFWOOF, ship it together for 5% off your entire order. Don't worry, you can just copy and paste them from the description down below, and you can use these codes as many times as you like. Okay, so I have one massive issue with this event. Where was the war? Realistically, this should have been called something like Attack of the Hutts and I would have been fine with that. But calling it War of the Bounty Hunters evokes certain kind of images and expectations. It's like hearing the name Charles Oliveira in an upcoming fight, you know, it's pretty much guaranteed to be a banger. But the only major confrontations between the bounty hunters happened really early on, and there is a couple of skirmishes later on, and instead the majority of this event takes place at an intergalactic auction for Han Solo. As well, because of the way the tie-ins were scheduled, it felt like this auction went on forever just because we were going back to it all the time. To give it props though, when it was about bounty hunters desperately scrambling to try and get the edge over Boba Fett and he wasn't even sure where he could go, it was great. I liked the inner politics of this subsection of the Star Wars universe, and I got the sense that it was ruthless and every man for himself. And I touched on the confrontation with Chewbacca, but there were still others sprinkled throughout the series that were entertaining, but unfortunately Boba Fett was just too elite for these to pose that much of a threat. Had there been more inner fights between other bounty hunters, it probably could have solved this issue, because we don't always necessarily need Boba Fett to be involved. It's a war of bounty hunters, it's not War of Boba Fett, because it did feel as if sometimes the book remembered its title and was like, okay, we promised a war with bounty hunters, so use a couple of pages to tick that box, but then just get us back to the auction. The worst part is as well that there were glimpses of a great storyline. Like when the call was put out on Boba, I thought that this was just going to get better and it was going to be something like John Wick. But the book seemed to completely forget that that was a plot point and Boba got sidelined, and the pace as a result just came to this grinding halt. They also spent just way too long forcing Kira, and I think that's how you say her name, I know she's been in other Star Wars things throughout the universe, into the spotlight, and I just could not care less about it. Also, she kind of looked a little bit like that actress out of Game of Thrones and the bad Terminator, but not the really bad Terminator movie. But yeah, I don't know, she's some kind of fan favourite character when she appeared in other stuff, but like I've always said, I'm not a true Star Wars fan, so I haven't read absolutely everything. So for me, she was just another barrier that prevented this event from being what it set out to be. In saying that, the space battle in the final issue was exciting, and it did feel like a fitting climax, you know, despite what the title of the book is. And I feel like I'm torn between, did I enjoy this main event, but I got caught up in the tie-ins, and that's what's preventing me from enjoying this? Or was it just a bit of a nothing story that didn't have enough to begin with? And I guess my answer to that question depends on if I need there to be real stakes for me to enjoy a book. Because there was a massive lack of tension when the focus shifted from Boba and it moved to the Hutts and the Empire and Crimson Dawn, all taking place at this auction, because I knew that everything was futile, because regardless of what happens in these issues, Han will end up at Jabba's palace. Instead, if this had actually focused on a war between bounty hunters, maybe some of which could be characters that we don't even see in the movies, it could have been more compelling, and I would have been intrigued to know who survives this thing. To give it credit though, it did a great job of expanding the lore behind the Hutts. And again, I have to stress that I have not read and watched everything Star Wars. So if there was some 16-page pamphlet that was exclusive to Asda in 1986 that explained everything that's in this book, then I haven't read it. I always look at Star Wars like a buffet, mostly because of the fact that I'm hungry, but also because you can eat what you want and you don't need to eat everything to feel full. There's nothing worse than people who are condescending because you haven't checked out everything Star Wars. But yeah, the inner conflict that was going on within the Hutt Syndicate was quite interesting and made me a little bit less disappointed when the focus shifted. It was also decent seeing how they led a space attack and that they weren't afraid of going head to head against the Empire. As well, the art in the main event was nice, but Luke Ross was great with the space battles, he had really dynamic paneling, and he just made all of his action feel big. He had a great photorealistic aspect as well that made his art fit in with the likes of those who come before him, like Cassidy and Immonen, and also LaRocca. It felt like it belonged alongside the movies, and it was great that I could look at this and know immediately where it placed in the continuity. Going into the tie-in issues, and the main Star Wars book was great. I didn't think I'd ever have to make this a point of praise, but I just loved that it was positioned alongside the main event. So it felt like it was part of that story and that it was included and that it was essential reading, rather than it being some weird prequel that's still somehow coming out whilst the event's happening. Yep, I'm gonna get into that later. I also think this was my favourite art style in this event. It was a bit more rough, and although I did enjoy what Ross brought to the table, I just felt like there was something more visually appealing here. This is where I also noticed the most work going into character development. I get that you can't rewrite history, especially when it comes to the Star Wars universe, but this did a phenomenal job of illustrating the fear that Luke was feeling after his battle with Vader and losing his hand, and also discovering that he's his father. Spoilers, I guess. Although Luke's role in the actual event was mostly just him saying that he's not strong enough to go up against Vader, I still like that we got some time with him. And for once, it was just nice to see him not in the main character role and having a bit more of a side plot and not stealing the show. Although ironically, he kinda did that anyway. There's also one moment where he has a flash to him fighting on Cloud City, but instead of having his hand chopped off, he kinda just gets Darth Mauled, and I laughed out loud when I saw this. It was so just goofy looking. There was also a damn good dogfight between Luke and Vader that managed to stay tense and still pack that emotional punch. This was one of the highlights of the entire event for me, and it wasn't even in the main storyline. And I think that might be why I'm a bit back and forth on this, because there were a lot of tie-ins that felt like they didn't really care that there was this war that was going on, and just kept along with the same plot that they would have been telling before this event began, but at the same time I still kind of enjoyed these stories. And weirdly, if I was reading one of these stories independently, I probably would have been annoyed if it paused forced to just chip in on this supposed war between the bounty hunters. Basically, what I'm getting at is that you really can't win with me. The Darth Vader series was enjoyable, but just not on the same level as Star Wars. And I had a massive problem with some of these issues that it felt like they should have been a prelude, but was somehow interspersed with the main event. Because a large part of this title is about Vader learning about the auction and also trying to get an invite, which was largely quite pointless. Sure, it still had its entertaining moments, but when Vader rocks up to the auction, I'm not sitting there and going, oh, that's impossible, there's no way he'd be there. He's Darth Vader. If he showed up at my front door, I don't think I'd be that surprised. He also had this protege character whose name I can't remember, but I do remember some of his fight scenes and they were really enjoyable. There were a lot of instances of one guy going against an army but still giving it his best shot and winning quite a bit of the time. And thinking back on this event as a whole, there was a lot of great action. I just wish it would have been more between bounty hunters. You know, kind of like what the title would suggest. Dr. Aphra was a title that I skipped after the first issue. I liked the first volume of her spin-off series, despite the fact that she annoyed me quite a bit in Darth Vader's Kieran Gillen run. But in this War of the Bounty Hunters, her tie-ins were the one that had absolutely no bearing over the entire event. Her only connection to this is that she happens to be at the auction and at one point kind of walks past Boba Fett. I skimmed through the following issues to make sure that I didn't miss anything major, but it wasn't like I was going for the main event and I was completely lost what was happening because I didn't read Dr. Aphra. I didn't know that there was a Bounty Hunters series and I wasn't really sure what to expect. I reckon if I knew more about these characters I'd enjoy it, but I can't say that it was great or a necessary read. Which is a bit disappointing considering that they're supposed to be part of this war. I did still read all of them though, and Valance was an interesting character and I would like to see more of him. He was the aspect that connected well to the main event, and I loved that he was trying to save Han and he had these flashbacks with him and you really got a bit of depth to this character. The art was decent as well and there was something manga-esque about it, and I did love those early issues where you've got all these neon lights against just a grungy city. So there was quite a bit that I did enjoy about this, but I think I'd have to read more of this series to really feel if it was involved in the main thing. So if I could go back and do this again, I'd probably read the main event, I'd throw in a few of the Darth Vader issues a little bit earlier on, and have the main Star Wars title interspersed and probably just read Bounty Hunters after. There is still a story worth reading in here, and I do just wish that my expectations weren't so high when I went into it. That is probably more on me, and I guess what I'm saying is don't get hyped before you read this and you'll probably have a great time. There is something in this event though that really did rub me the wrong way, and it's similar to what I picked up on in the Sinestro Corps War review that I did, but I guess talking about it in any kind of detail would be spoilers. This is your final spoiler warning. If you don't want anything ruined, skip to the final verdict. But yeah, so Boba Fett got Han back. Now the only thing that I want to talk about is that I hated that this event just ended up becoming all about Crimson Dawn in some new trilogy of events. Why not just focus on this and have something that's led entirely by Boba Fett? Make this an absolute blockbuster that everybody loves and then maybe consider doing another one. And when I think back about how much of War of the Bounty Hunters was about Crimson Dawn and this auction, I'm wondering if from the beginning that this was a bait and switch. You know, get people reading for Fett and just hope that they stay for Kira. That's not a great plan in my eyes. I'm an event apologist, I love quite a lot of them, but when an event is really good, I will want to read the tie-ins and the spin-offs and everything that comes out of it. It doesn't need to reassure me that there's going to be a sequel. It almost felt like this book didn't have enough confidence in its own concept, so it was like, no wait, you might not have enjoyed this, but there's going to be more that's coming. I know that the second event's already out, I think it might be called Crimson Reign, and I might check that one out. I'm assuming that's going to get an omnibus as well, along with whatever the third one will be. So maybe I'm part of the problem because I know I'm going to read that, because I'm mostly wondering where they can go and what story they'd be trying to tell. But as far as I'm aware, in episode 6 there isn't any reference to Crimson Dawn, so something must majorly go wrong in these events. So yeah, it might open the door for a more exciting story, and I really hope that it does. But in the end, it just made me feel like War of the Bounty Hunters was just trying to be a prequel to something else, than trying to be the best event that it could be. This is my final verdict. And Star Wars always felt like an event to me when I was growing up. It used to feel like the world stopped whenever there was a new adventure in a galaxy far, far away. And Marvel's done a great job with the Star Wars comics that they've been printing lately, and when it came to War of the Bounty Hunters, I had very high expectations that unfortunately this just didn't live up to. There are glimmers of greatness, like the moments that we have with Boba Fett, the emotional development for Luke, a few cool Vader scenes and some stuff with the Hutts. If you'd given this a different title, maybe I'd be less harsh, but you can't promise a war between bounty hunters characters, and then focus your entire event around some boring auction that's pointless in the grand scheme of things. Sure, yes, there is still a lot to enjoy, especially if you just stick to the main event, the Darth Vader book, and also the main Star Wars title. And who knows, maybe this is like The Force Awakens, and I won't really know how I feel about this until I check out some of the sequels and I see exactly what the plan was. I'd still give this a recommendation, but I don't think it's one of those drop whatever you're reading and pick this up straight away kind of things, because it does fall victim to a lot of the issues that most comic events have. But if you don't make the same mistake that I did and you go into the event knowing that, then I reckon you could still have a good time. However, I am going to start being harsher with my scores and not just giving everything a 70 or 80%, and with that in mind, I'm going to give this a respectable 60%. Woof! I guess that's the video, and hopefully you enjoyed it, but until next time, just make sure that you stay safe and stay mad, all you dogs. Woof woof! See you in the next video.